Not good news for 45. 45 thinks that by attacking Iran, that he thinks he will get himself reelected for a second term, and he's wrong if he thinks that. Beginning in 2011 and continuing through the next year, 45 began obsessively predicting that 45 would start a war with Iran in order to be reelected. 45 stated that publicly on at least a half a dozen occasions, explicitly positing that attacking Iran would help Obama win re-election. 45 was able to do that. Obama was able to get re-elected without having to start a war with Iran. Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. Neither do you, you fucking dumbass. He's weak and he's ineffective. Damn, it sounds like you're talking about yourself, 45. So the only way he figures that he's going to get re-elected, and as sure as you're sitting there, is to start a war with Iran, which is exactly what 45 did. Just like 45's notions that Obama would direct his Attorney General Wolm to investigate or not, or pressure the Federal Reserve to loosen the money supply in order to help his party win the next election. 45 attacks on Obama were the purest form of projection that reflect his cynical belief that every squatter will naturally abuse their powers and thus provide a roadmap to his own intentions. And indeed, 45 immediately followed the killing of Qasem Soleimani by metaphorically wrapping himself in the stars and stripes. No doubt he anticipates at least a faint echo of the rally around the flag dynamic that has buoyed many of his predecessors. But 45's critics need not assume that he will enjoy any such benefit and should grasp their own responsible help determine it. One salient fact is that it's not 2001 or even 2003. A poll earlier this summer found that just 18% of Americans prefer to take military action against Iran, as against the 78% not wanting to rely mainly on economic and diplomatic efforts. It is in part due to a public war weariness that Republicans have sworn repeatedly for years that they would not go to war with Iran. The possibility of such a military escalation was precisely the central dispute between the parties when the Obama administration struck its nuclear deal. Without a deal, we risk even more war in the Middle East, argued President Obama. Republicans furiously insisted that this was absurd. War has never been the alternative, said Republican Senator Mitch McConnell in 2015. It's not this deal versus war. It's either this deal or a better deal or more sanctions. The Conservative Heritage Foundation argued that blocking Obama's deal makes the likelihood of war or a conventional and regional nuclear arms race less likely. And as 45 mold following through on his threat to abrogate the deal, conservatives fiercely denied that doing so would lead to a military conflict. Here is former Israel ambassador Michael Oren writing in the New York Times 2 years ago, "The only alternative to the Iran nuclear deal is war. This is what the Obama administration and proponents of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with Iran claimed in 2015. Nobody in the Middle East believed that the United States would ever strike Iran, but though enough Americans did that the deal went through. The alternative was never war, but a better deal." Oren further insisted that fears the international community would refuse to follow America's lead by canceling the deal, and that Iran would limit nuclear inspections, and both would fail to materialize. Now they predict that the international community will not follow America's lead in withdrawing from the deal and reimposing sanctions. Worse, they warn, Iran might use the opportunity to evict United Nations. Would ever evict United Nations inspectors and ramp up its nuclear program. He wrote, "All of these assumptions are fake. In fact, these assumptions have proven true. American allies have stayed in the agreement and refused to reimpose sanctions, and Iran has started restricting inspectors and begun restarting its nuclear program." 45's allies have framed the issue as being about Qasem Soleimani's moral culpability, or Iran's responsibility for escalating the conflict. And it certainly is true that Iran is a nasty, aggressive, murderous regime. But none of these refutes the fact that 45's Iran policy is failing on its own terms. Having violated the diplomatic agreement on the premise that doing so would not lead to war, they are now blaming Iran for the war they insisted would never happen. Americans historically support their squatters in foreign conflicts, both the wise ones and unwise ones, at least initially. 45 no doubt believes that the halo effect will last at least through November, that he might undertake an action that would harm his re-election out of some larger sense of duty to the nation or the world is unfathomable. But squatters traditionally benefit from a presumption of competence, or at least moral legitimacy. from the opposition. 45 has forfeited his. He would not have Democratic leaders standing shoulder to shoulder with him, and his practice of disregarding and smearing government intelligence should likewise dispel any benefit of the doubt attached to claims he makes about the necessity of his actions. 45 has made it plain that he views American war fighting as nothing but the extension of domestic policies, and that we should believe him, which I don't.